Hi everybody, welcome back to Small Caliber Arms Review. I'm Richard, and if you remember, I did a video on this a few weeks ago. This is the 1890 Winchester that I've got. This one is chambered in .22 Winchester rimfire. Now, I said I was going to do a restoration on this thing. I guess you could call it more of a resto mod. There were a few different versions of this rifle that come out back in the day. A lot of the early ones had color case hardened receivers on them, so both parts of your receiver would have been color case hardened, and blued barrels on them and blued magazine tube. I did see a picture of one that was a custom ordered one or a special ordered one that was completely nickel plated, but there was a two-tone version made also. And it was nickel receiver, nickel butt plate, trigger guard and everything, color case hardened hammer and trigger, and the barrel and the magazine tube were blued. The more I look at this rifle and I look at the coloring on it and stuff, I almost think, I don't know for sure, since it's so worn and pitted and everything, that this could have been one of the two-tone ones. I don't know. But especially when I look on the butt plate on here, the butt plate has some serious pitting on it, but there are places on here where it's smooth and silvery, kind of shiny. It almost looks like this could have been a nickel plated one. I don't know that for a fact. The only way to find out is to take the numbers and run them through Winchester and see if they can pull out what it was. That usually gets kind of expensive, and this is not a really highly expensive rifle. But what I'm going to do is I am going to nickel plate the receiver and the butt plate on here, and I'm going to blue the barrel and the magazine tube. I'm going to make this one into a two-tone one. I'm not trying to pass it off as an original like that, unless maybe in the future I decide to, have Winchester confirm it. But that's what I'm going to do. Now, one of the things I was a little worried about was the butt plate on here. I thought it was a stamped steel one that was welded together and finished up. It's actually cast. That's cast iron or cast steel, one of the two. It is a ferrous metal anyways. And I'm going to start with that piece right there with the Evapo-Rust. Now, I went and did some shopping today and picked up a whole lot of the chemicals I'm going to need to do the restoration on this. The Evapo-Rust is one of the things I've got. I did get a couple gallons of distilled white vinegar, some distilled water, some acetone. I got a little setup over here. I'm going to make some nickel acetate, which is the acetic acid is the vinegar, and I'm going to create nickel ions inside there, and then I'm going to use that to plate the parts on here that I want to nickel plate. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. I'm going to take this butt plate off here. I'm going to start with that piece in the Evapo-Rust and let it sit. The cool thing about Evapo-Rust is that it will only attack the rust. It will not attack the metal that is not rusted, which is great because I don't have a whole lot of time to work on this, so I'll probably let some parts sit and soak for a while and then go back and take them out. And I don't want to remove more base metal than I have to. The nice thing about that butt plate being cast is that it's very thick, so the pitting that is on there should be pretty easy to take care of. The screws look like they're in pretty good shape too. The heads are not too messed up. And then there's the butt plate. And like I said, it's cast, which gives me a lot of thickness there, so I should be able to remove a lot of those pits there without having to fill anything in on it. Got a little small container here. I'm going to pop it in this and fill it up with a little bit of Evapo-Rust and go from there. Okay, I've got the entire thing disassembled. I went ahead and took out the hammer and the trigger, which is kind of a pain because the smallest pin I've ever seen in a firearm holds a bushing in here. And this is the little bushing, and I was able to get it out without destroying the pin. So it's down in here somewhere. It will be able to be reused. And the only thing I don't have in there is the magazine tube, the receiver, and the barrel. And these are going to get treated a little bit different, but I do have to get the receiver off of the barrel, and I need my barrel wrench, action wrench, to get that off of there. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and use Evapo-Rust on here. Now this is, I've watched a bunch of different videos on stuff, and this, like I said, will not attack the base metal. So it is going to take off all the rust and leave any of that good base metal still on there. Depending on the depth and the age of the rust, it says soak your item for at least 30 minutes for light rust and 12 to 24 hours for stubborn rust. So we're going to put it in here for at least 12 hours, and then I'm going to get my nickel acetate going while this is soaking. So let's go ahead and pop this open. And this stuff is safe too. And it's reusable. All right, that's probably about 3/4 of a gallon that's in there right now. And like I said, it's safe, it's reusable, and we can just let it sit in there because there is some heavy rust in here. Go ahead and put the lid on it and set it off to the side and get busy on the nickel plating solution. Okay, so I've got my magnetic stir set up here. I've got one of my electrodes here already bent. Now these are pure nickel electrode, anode, cathode. It's going to be both really, because one side's the anode, one side's the cathode. We'll go ahead and bend this one up. Just a little hook we need to hang it over the edge there. That way we can hook our electrodes on there, our wires on there. We'll get the wires ready. And we'll get one hooked on each side. Now it does not matter which one goes where right now, but it will matter once you do the plating. Bend that out just a little bit. All right, now one of the things you're going to have to add to it is some salt. Now I got a non-iodized salt here. I don't know if that makes any difference or not, but that's what I'm going to use. Now this will make it conductive because the vinegar is going to be very little conductivity to it. So we'll go ahead and turn the stirrer on and get it mixing up, and then we'll go ahead and turn on our power supply. There we go. And we're running less than 1 amp. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit of heat on it too. That'll just help speed it up a little bit. Now you don't have to have the stir in there and the heat on everything. It'll do it on its own. It's just, this is supposed to kind of help kick up the speed of the reaction a little quicker. And then now we just wait. See, there's some good chunks there in the bottom of it. Definitely want to get all that out of there. All right, now we'll get all this cleaned up, moved out of the way, and start another batch of it. It took about 2 hours to get it to a good green, and then I cut the voltage way down to like 1.5 volts and let it run overnight. And it was pretty much saturated when I got here this morning. Now I could probably just add some more vinegar to it, and that would make it would just weaken the solution a little bit. And I have heard a rumor that sometimes a little bit weaker solution does better than a really strong one. So maybe I won't make the next one quite as strong, and it'll kind of balance out in there. But I need to get this jar pretty much full to be able to cover all the parts that I want to do in there. Okay, I've got everything set up. I got my solution made. Now I've went ahead and put only one of the zinc anode, cathode, the zinc conductors in there, and then I've got my little bar across the top there. I bent up a couple pieces of copper wire I'm going to hang my pieces from. I've got two parts that I took off of the magazine tube, the inner tube, the end knob and then the follower that goes inside there. And I'm going to attempt to nickel plate these. I have already cleaned them up and polished them up, and I'm going to get them out of the acetone bath that they're in, allow them to dry off. It does not take long for acetone to dry, but the thing I do not want to do is I do not want to get any of this oil from my skin on there and contaminate it, because it'll block the flow of the ions to the piece there and to leave your fingerprint on there. I have polished the end of it up pretty good, I think anyways, and cleaned out all the little knurling on there. All right, now we'll give it a shot. And it's at 5 volts. You want the voltage to be kind of low on this. And I think I'm also going to drop my little magnet in there. That way I can agitate it while it's doing its thing. Maybe turn the voltage down just a little bit too. Let's get it at about, let's say about 2 volts. And we'll see what it does. All right, I've got my nickel plating done on the end of the inner rod tube and the little follower piece in there. Not the best, I don't think, but not bad anyways. And this is all experimental. It's not kind of experimental. It is experimental for me because I have not done any nickel plating. I have done a little bit of bluing with the chemical blue. This is Super Blue from Birchwood Casey. And I'm only going to do the outer magazine tube and see how it comes out. Now there is a lot of pitting on here, so I sanded as much of it out as I could, and we're going to see how it works. So I'm going to get my acetone out and get it degreased, because you can't have any grease on it, any oil or anything on there. So we're just going to wipe it down with some acetone. And got my gloves on so I don't get any oils from my skin onto the metal part there. And that should be good and degreased right there. And let's go ahead and get one of these little cotton pads out. And I used these when I did my cricket rifle. So get one of those out. And I got one of these little droppers here. You don't want to use it straight out of the bottle there, because you can contaminate it. So what I'm going to do is put a little bit in this cup. That ought to be plenty right there. This, you want to avoid getting contact with your skin. Set that to the side. Give it one more wipe. All right. Now we're going to take the little cotton pad there, dip it in, squeeze the excess off, and we just want to put a light coating on there. And you can see it turns colors pretty much immediately. Now we're going to take this up, rinse it off, and then card it with some 4/0 steel wool, and then do it again over and over. Okay, so far I have done it 5 times, I think. Same thing. Application, rinse, and then carding, and then reapply over and over and over again. It does look a lot nicer than it did, and it kind of distracts you from the pits that are in there and everything, but they're there. It's just you have to look a little harder for them now. I'm going to keep on doing this. I'll probably do about another, oh, maybe 5 more times. We'll see how it does. Okay, that is, I believe, 10 applications of the Birchwood KC Super Blue, and it does not look bad. It does not look like it's brand new, but it's not brand new either. So next thing I got to do is I'm going to run a patch through there, get any water droplets out of the inside of it, and then I'm going to go ahead and put some oil on it. It is nice and squeaky clean right now. Dry and kind of burnished a little bit, or carded, so it's fairly smooth. So we'll get some oil on it, and that'll preserve it after I get the water droplets out of the inside. Okay, so here it is all assembled. The only piece that I have restored for this firearm so far, this is the magazine tube, and I nickel plated the end of it there, and I nickel plated the follower and polished them up pretty good, and they're okay. They're a lot better than they were before. I'm pretty happy with the way the bluing come out on here, even though it is super blue and not the traditional rust bluing, which I wanted to do and I may still do, but in a time crunch, I'm trying to get things done, and I don't know if I'll have my tank ready, you know, anytime real soon. But it looks pretty good. Nice contrast between the nickel and the inner tube there. I did not do anything to the inner tube other than just clean it up a little bit and lube it up, and it looks pretty good, I think, anyways. All right, so we're back on the Winchester 1890 here. I did do a few things. I got my magazine tube blued. I did not do anything to the inner tube there. It is just in the white or raw steel. I did nickel plate the follower and the end cap on there, and I may redo that because I've learned a few more things since doing this. All of this is a learning process for me, so there's a lot of pitting on this tube, and I think it really kind of distracts from it when it's nice and well blued. Now this was a cold blue that I used on here, so it's not traditional, and I don't know that I'm going to have my hot bluing setup ready, and I want to keep moving on this project here. I am going to nickel plate a lot of the parts, and some of them I've already done, like the 2 rings that hold on the magazine tube. I've done the takedown screw. I've done the wood screws that go into the buttstock, the ones that go on the tang to hold the buttstock into the receiver and all that good stuff. I have not done the barrel yet or the main part of the receiver there. I'm getting ready to make up a tube so I can put this in and soak the whole thing in Evapo-Rust. There's some heavy pitting on this barrel. There's pitting on the inside of it there, so I want to dunk the whole thing in there, soak it, and see how it comes out. And then I'm going to take the receiver off there because I'm going to nickel plate the receiver, and I want it to, the barrel will be blued, the receiver will be nickel plated. Going for the two-tone look that was original to some of the models they had back then. The other part of the receiver, I guess this is the part that goes in the buttstock. I don't guess, I know it is. But I'm going to nickel plate this and the receiver, the barrel and everything will be blued on there. I've got some of my small parts here blued. My mainspring, my trigger spring, my rear sight. Some of the parts I'm going to leave in the white, like the bushing for the hammer. The hammer I did blue. I did take some of the rust pits off of it, and it was color case hardened, and you can actually still see some of that color case hardening on there, it looks like. I went ahead and blued the trigger. Again, it's got some rust pits on it too, so this is not going to be taking it back to its original condition. I just don't want to remove any more metal than I have to, and since it's not in that great a shape anyways, it's going to be my own, and I'm going to do it up the way I want to do. The butt plate that goes on here, which surprised me, is cast iron and not stamped steel. It is a pretty heavy duty piece, which was really nice because this was some heavily pitted metal right here, and I've still got a way to go before I get all the pits out of it. I am hitting it with a file, then I'll sand it, polish it, and I'm going to nickel plate that. The wood stock on here, the butt stock and the fore end, these things are really dark because they are soaked with oil. Over the years, the last 100 and whatever years this thing's been around, there's some really dark staining in here. Now, I did watch Larry Potterfield, who is an expert gunsmith and an excellent restorer of old firearms, and I wondered, how do I get all that oil out of there? I'm going to strip the finish off of it and soak it in some acetone, and I may have to soak it for quite a while, let it dry for a few days to get that oil out of there. But it's really kind of a terrible looking buttstock. It's in pretty good shape. There are a few gouges in there, cuts, scrapes that I cannot get out. There may be a couple dents in there that I might be able to get out. Actually, I don't see any real dents in it. There's a nice gouge right there, a nice one underneath here. So it's just going to live with some of its battle scars. And then we're going to put some walnut stain on this and some tru-oil and see how it goes. Okay, I've got the buttstock and the fore end cleaned up here, sanded down smooth. Now the buttstock on here, there is some bad staining on here, and I believe this is iron that's actually been pulled into the wood there, because I have soaked this thing for a long time in some acetone, and it did pull a lot of that oil staining out of it, but it's just, some of this is not coming out no matter what I do. And if I keep sanding it, I'm gonna sand too much, and I don't want to do that, because right now I've got the buttstock and the butt plate, which is right here, actually fit together there. So there is very little of the wood protruding over the metal or the metal protruding over the wood. So they're pretty much fitted together, and I got to polish this up and plate it anyways, so I'm okay with sanding that down some. But these stains that are on here, it's just not coming out, and it is solid black. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit it with some dark walnut. Should I? I don't know. Probably not. I should probably just go ahead and oil it, but I'm not going to. I'm gonna go ahead and put the dark stain on there, and we'll see what happens with it. Hopefully it will kind of take away from the dark stains on there, maybe make them a little less noticeable. Maybe it'll make them worse. Yeah, that doesn't look too terrible. Yeah, they're still pretty noticeable, pretty dark streaks on there, but there's like I said, nothing I could do. Soaking in acetone did not seem to stop that part of it, but I don't think it looks too bad. All right, I will get this hung up here in a few minutes. We're going to go ahead and hit the fore end, and it's fairly even. We'll see how that comes out. All right, and wipe off the excess from here. And the color does seem pretty close. The buttstock might be a little bit lighter, especially in some of the other places, but we're gonna let that dry and see how it turns out. All right, everybody, we are back down here working on the Winchester 1890. Now, I did make up my tube finally. Get my microphone unhooked from things. I did make up my tube finally for soaking the barrel and the receiver in here. They are in here together in Evapo-Rust. So this stuff is reusable, so I'm going to go ahead and dump it back in here, hopefully without making too big of a mess. And it took probably less than half a gallon or so, or maybe a little over half a gallon to fill this tube up and get everything submerged in the Evapo-Rust. All right, there we go. Oh, that looks so much nicer. Yeah, that is a whole lot nicer. There was a lot of heavy rust pitting on this thing. The pitting is still there, it did not go away. But yeah, that sure looks a whole lot better. None of the bluing left on it. Yeah, that is pretty. Now, I have been looking at this thing closely, and I wanted to nickel plate the receiver. In order to do that, I need to remove the receiver from the barrel, which is kind of a task. It's not that hard to do, but getting it back on exactly in the same place where it needs to be to get everything lined up is a little trickier, especially if you do not have the proper tools for it. Not saying that you can't do it with a very large crescent wrench, but that's really not the way to do it. So I'm thinking I'm going to blue it like it should have been. Some were blued, some of the early ones were color case hardened on the receiver, and I think this one is just going to get blued. That'll keep me from having to take the receiver off the barrel. The bluing does hide some of the pitting that's in there. It's not that it really hides it, it just makes it a little less noticeable anyways. Now there's some pretty bad pitting right here around where all the lettering is on the top of it there, and I'm going to try to get some of that out. Some of it I will draw file it, and hopefully get it to look pretty good without removing any of the letters that are on there, which you don't want to do that at all. I was able to get a lot of the pitting out of the receiver part without destroying the serial number or the Winchester logo and everything on the back of the receiver. I need to get this all cleaned out, get the bore cleaned out. Now I am going to borescope it and give you a shot of what the inside of the barrel looks like after the Evapo-Rust. Unfortunately, I did not record it when I looked at the inside of it before the Evapo-Rust. I did look at it, but I didn't record it. So you'll just have to take my word. It was really, really bad before. It's probably not the best afterwards. Yeah, the pitting's still in there. There is still a little bit of rifling left in there, which is a good thing. Like if they say this thing shot great. But I'm going to start working on getting this all cleaned up and everything. And then, yes, I am going to cold blue it because I still don't have my tank ready yet. There's a lot of things I got to do. Plus, I'm a little under the weather, so yeah, not really feeling it a whole lot anyways. All right, I've got my test long borescope here, and I'm going to go ahead and record the inside of this time because I didn't record it last time. Now this is after the Evapo-Rust. So right now we're looking at the chamber end of it. That is the edge right there. A little bit of fuzz. I ran some patches through it, clean it out. So the chamber part of it is going to be sort of smooth. It's smooth enough where it doesn't hang up any of the rounds in there anyways, and you can still see there's a lot of pitting in there, a lot of little rust bumps and everything, and it doesn't get much better as you go farther in there. Now I already fired rounds through this gun and it does fire just fine. It actually groups pretty darn nice. And you can start to see a little bit of the rifling right in there, and right now we're probably only about 2 inches in there. So we'll get it going down there, and you can see there's still some decent rifling left. We're probably about 4 or 5 inches in now, and let's take a 360-degree look right there. There's some pretty bad pits, but there's still some pretty good rifling right there. We'll go ahead and run it on down to the end there. Still some decent rifling with a lot of pits and rust in there, but surprisingly it still fires very well. That's probably the worst place in there right now, and you can see it when you look through the bore there. You can see some of those areas in there that are pretty rough. Now I have run wire brushes through there, the bronze wire brushes, to clean up some of that. The Evapo-Rust did take up quite a bit. There's some more fuzz there from the patches, and it's getting hung up in there too, so it will be cleaned out again, I guarantee you, before, because there's a lot of stuff that's going to happen to this before it's all put back together and ready for taking out of the range. As we get to the end down here, where the end of the barrel, we're still probably a couple inches from the end of it. Now we start to get into a little better rifling, a little less pitting. It's still not ideal. It's not like it should be, but you've got rifling all the way around it there, and we're getting closer to the end of it. In fact, there is the end of it. So that last little bit of rifling in there is really what sets the bullet spinning, as it's starting to spin before it gets out to the end there. but that last little bit before it leaves the barrel is the part that's really going to get that bullet spinning accurately, traveling accurately. And the rifling is pretty good there at the end. Now this is not going to be an everyday shooter, everyday plinker or anything, but it is functional, and that's the part I do like about it, because I wanted a functional 1890 Winchester, and I got one. All right, I have filed, I have sanded, I have done everything I could to this barrel. I got as much of the pitting as I could get out of it, and I took it up and scrubbed it up with some degreaser, some purple stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and get it degreased again, just from me handling it. I'll get it wiped down with some acetone, and then I'm going to apply the super blue, and we'll see how it does. I did shove a couple dowels into the ends of the barrel, keep stuff from getting inside of it, and that'll help when I'm rinsing it off. Alright, let's give this thing a try and see how it does. Alright, I'm going to take this up, rinse in some cool water, and then come back and do it again. Okay, so there was the first application, and it is not the prettiest, that's for sure. But we're going to card it. I got it dried off. And it tended to leave some little white spots where that pitting was on the rust there, which is kind of odd. I'd never seen that before. But we're going to card it. I'm just carding it, polishing it with some 4-aught steel wool. It'll help kind of even things out a little bit. At least that's the plan. Now I did pick up some of these wire brushes from the Hawken Doctor, and these are super fine carding brushes, as well as a carding wheel that I've got there too. That's more for the rust bluing though. Not so much for the cold bluing. Alright, let's go for application number 2. Alright, next rinse. Okay, so I have blued 2 parts. I blued the barrel, technically 3, the barrel and the receiver, and I don't like it. It's not terrible, it's not the worst, I guess, but it is so thin, and everything seems to have went bad when I soaked my acetone, or my steel wool in acetone. And then everything went bad. And then I cleaned the butt plate off with acetone and let it dry. And then when I put the cold blue on there, the super blue, it streaked instantly, like it had oil on it, which is not a good thing. But it looks almost like a black chrome, I'd say, kind of, sort of. And it doesn't look terrible on the buttstock there. The receiver has got pits in it. It's not much I can do about that. I've taken as much of it down as I could. Same thing with the barrel. On the sides that did not have any writing, I hit it pretty hard with with a file to keep everything flat and get all the pits out that I could, but I don't want to end up with this little tiny thin pencil barrel, so I can only do so much. Now I am going to take and get it oiled up so that it doesn't rust on me, because I'm done for this weekend, unfortunately, and I'll have to hit it again next weekend. I'm just not sure if I want to leave it like that. It doesn't look terrible. It just doesn't look, I mean, it looks better than it did when I bought the rifle, that's for sure. Yes, I should have done hot bluing or rust bluing, but like I said, I'm impatient and just haven't got my tank set up yet. Who knows, maybe I'll sand it all down and do it again. It's not horrible, it's just, I don't know. I am pretty pleased with the way the butt plate turned out. That is, I removed a lot of metal from that to get all the pits out of it. And there's still like 2 or 3 little pits in there that I just did not feel comfortable taking all the way down, because, I mean, it is pretty thick, but then we start getting into the part where there's not as much metal there, so they're not that noticeable. Probably looks pretty good from there. And like I said, it's a lot better than it was when I got it. Maybe I'll just leave it. Now, one of the things that holds this bushing in, the only thing that holds this bushing in, is this one little pin that goes right in there. And it is a very tiny pin. And it's probably the smallest pin I've ever seen on a firearm. Now, one of the things I did do was I sacrificed one of these little screwdrivers, because this is the only thing I've got that was small enough to go through that hole and drive that pin out. So now I got to drive that pin back in, and I got to find that pin because it is very tiny. And it is right there, so hopefully I can get this thing in there. Don't know if I'll be able to do it on camera or not, but I'll give it a try. And there we go, it's in. Now it will not pull all the way out, which is the way it's supposed to be. Probably the hardest thing to do on this rifle is that pin right there. Hope I didn't forget to put anything in while I was doing that. If you were paying attention and you've taken one of these apart before, you'll notice I forgot to put a really important piece in there. This is also held in by the bushing that holds the hammer in there, and it goes right in there. Yeah, that's kind of an important one. So it looks like everything I've done so far, I have to take back apart. I guess it's practice, huh? So I don't have to take the bolt back apart though, but I've got to take everything back out of here. Okay, I did not have to take the trigger back out, but I did have to take everything else out of there pretty much. So I've got it in there now. This is the lifter. This is the piece that determines what caliber your rifle is by the depth of this hole underneath here. that is where your cartridge goes in there. So the short ones are going to be quite a bit shorter than the long rifle, and then the Winchester rimfire. So it's all in there now. Now I've got to put my takedown pin screw back in there, and I've got to get that little pin back in there again, and hopefully this time I can get it in there pretty easily. I've been practicing. Okay, so now I've got this part all put together finally. I got to put my hammer spring back in. Okay, so one of the things I need to get done is I need to get the fore end all oiled up. Now this is Birchwood Casey tru-oil, which is going to be a lot quicker than traditional linseed oil. This has got polymers and stuff in it, lets it dry a little bit quicker. Normally you put it on with your fingers, which I have no problem doing. It's just I can't get my fingers in some of these places, so we're just going to put it inside there with a brush. I want to get all the wood sealed up, and getting down in the grooves in there too with my fingers is pretty difficult to do, so not going to be able to do that, so I am going to put it on with a brush. And it really does give a nice finish. You don't have to worry about getting it on your fingers. It does not clean off the easiest, but it's not the worst either. And I got me a handy little hanger here. I'm going to put it on and hang that up and let it dry. Okay, now we're going to get this thing put together and hopefully finished up. We're going to go ahead and put the magazine tube back on the barrel. We're going to go ahead and put everything back on here. My tru-oil is dry on the fore end, so it's good to go. Now to put this in, I've got my two lugs on there. We got to slide the magazine tube in here. There's a little dimple right here that this little pin goes in, and this pin actually goes through that rear lug and keeps the magazine tube from turning, also keeps it from pulling out. So we're going to go ahead and put it in here first. Then we're going to go ahead and put the bolt in here, because the bolt takes the action piece there and actually operates that piece. So we want this to go down inside there. So we're going to go ahead and slide the bolt in. Now the bolt is going to go ahead and lock in place, because the firing pin is what actually locks it in there. Now we can go ahead and put the action rod on there and just get it kind of lined up so we can get the magazine tube slid through there. And it's going to go all the way through into the hole on the end of the receiver. That little piece there is going to line up with this. And before we get that put all the way in there, we got to put this little piece in here. This is a little tension spring that holds the magazine tube, the inner magazine tube, kind of firmly in place. And it sits right here in this little cutout in the tube. So we're going to put that in. We're going to push it. Well, we actually have to roll it over while we do this, because in this front lug there's a notch in the bottom of it for that piece to fit inside of. So we've got to carefully roll that around, and hopefully we'll get it lined up with it. Actually, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to pull that inner magazine tube out. I think that may make it a little easier to do. There we go. Got that in there. That is lined up with that. We need to look through here and make sure that that dimple is lined up. There we go. Okay, now I can put this pin. Now, you normally drive the pins from left to right to take them out. We're going to drive from right to left to put it back in there. I don't know if this is a tapered hole in here, but that is the way they are normally done. So we'll get it started using the soft side there, and we'll take one of the brass punches. and drive that in there till it's flush on both sides, and that is in there. So now the only things left to do are, let me see, we can put the cover on here. This little cover that goes over that rod keeps it in place, and that is a tapered slot on there. We'll slide that in and put this screw back in it. Snug that down just a bit. Now what we can do is go ahead and put the other part of the receiver in there. And what that'll allow us to do is let the hammer down. Now we can work the action, and it works just like it's supposed to there. Now the only thing we got left to put in there is we'll go ahead and slide the magazine tube back in it. And we'll go ahead and get the buttstock, which has been hanging up and drying for a few hours. And it looks pretty good and feels pretty good. Now we'll go ahead and get the butt plate put back on it. And I left the screws nickel plated. It's a little contrast, maybe kind of ties in the lugs to the magazine tube with the overall design of it, I guess. It's the rug that brings the whole thing together. And then we can go ahead and slide the buttstock right back on the rifle. And I've got 2 screws to put in here. Now these 2 screws are also going to hold on the tang mounted peep sight that I got on here. This is a Lyman. I'm not sure exactly what model it is, but it is stamped WS on the bottom, which are the ones for the Winchester 1890s and I think the 1907s. Now it is going to come with, or it should come with, a couple extra screws. Your rear screw is a little bit longer than what your original one would have been because it's going to take up a little more space with the Lyman sight on there. And then you've taken out the front plug, and now you're going to put this screw in there. Let's get that folded down out of the way. I like to get the screws started just by holding the bit in my hand. That way I don't, I'll know if it's cross-threaded because I wouldn't be able to turn it that much. I'm going to snug it down on there a little bit and then hit the back one. And there it is, the somewhat restored Winchester model 1890 with a Lyman rear peep sight on it. I really like that sight. Next thing I'll have to do is take it out and actually sight it in to see if I need to do any kind of adjustments on it. Now, this rear sight does not have any windage adjustment. The only windage adjustment I'm really going to have is going to be my front sight, which I did take off and put back on. I just kind of centered it on that top flat, but I don't know if it's exactly right. Yeah, I like it. And I've got the smaller aperture in there. It does have a little flip down aperture, which might be kind of hard to see here, but you can push that down and it opens up the inside of that a little bit, so you've got a better field of view there. And right now, this actually, I don't know what my range is set at on here, but I am looking over top of my rear sight there. So I can pull this down, and since I've still got my rear sight on, I've got that original setting there. Then if I want to do the long distance stuff, I can adjust this thing up. There are markings on there, but they're not, they're just lines, and it doesn't tell you exactly what the range is. That's something you'll probably have to figure out on your own there. But I like it. I think it looks a whole lot better than it used to. And it seems to function so far just like it is. But I have to get it out on the range and see if I screwed anything up. I don't think I did, but I think it looks a whole lot better than it used to. If you'll remember the pictures in the beginning when I showed you when I was standing there holding it and going back and forth with it, it looked really, really rough. And now it just doesn't look as rough until you get up to it close and look at it. You can still see the pitting and stuff, but I've taken as much of it out of it as I can, and I think it's still a good looking rifle. Anyways, thanks for watching Small Caliber Arms Review. If you could, reach up here and hit this button to check out some of my other videos, and hit the little round one down there to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.